Welcome to AFF Winds of Change, the show that takes you behind the blade. As host Afonso Faria explore the evolving wind energy landscape. With decades of experience in management supervision and quality assurance, he leads insightful discussions on the changes shaping our industry. We invite you to listen, learn, and join the conversation.
Hi everyone, I'm Afonso Faria, CEO AFF Wind Services. Welcome to AFF Winds of Change, podcast about the renewable industry. Today we're going to touch on a vision in the industry, how it's growing and what potentials it still has to grow, what targets it still needs to grow. We're also going to talk a little bit, we'll go further into it on other podcasts, but how solar energy is coming up strong within the renewable industry. We have a very special guest today, Mr. Tony from Renewable in Africa. Tony has been doing an excellent job promoting renewables in Africa, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how the African market is growing as a big potential and how it needs to be developed further. The European market itself is also growing, especially into the countries that were more dependent on gas pipelines. We're not going to go into political, but we are going to talk a little bit about this growth. Other than that, the podcast is the first podcast, so the next podcast will come with more topics. Today, we're going to touch base on those topics that I have just said and also talk a little bit about what it is that we're going to do in the next one. AFF Wind Services is a supplier within the wind renewable industry. In February 2026, it's going to be 10 years. We're still thinking about making a celebration party, not sure yet where and how. I'm in the renewable industry, so that is 2006 when I started. January 2006 is when I joined this beautiful industry, and I've not left ever since, as you can see. What I've done in the past, where I've come from, what has led me to go into this industry is I did not grow up in Portugal. I'm Portuguese, the company is Portuguese, but I grew up in the Netherlands. After I finished that, I moved back to Portugal. There was a personal decision that I had made. My family had moved back, so I made a decision to move back as well. Soon after that, I saw a job advert looking for mechanical or electrical engineers. One of the demands was to speak English, and I did speak English. I decided to apply for that. I was looking for a better job, something different. And sure enough, that's when I started, January 2006. Soon after that, I started traveling all over Europe, and I got a taste for it. I haven't stopped traveling ever since. The company has grown quite a lot this year, putting me in a position where I need to be more in the office and take care of business. That is one of the things as a CEO that you learn very quick, is that your job is not different. Your job is to make sure that the ones working for you have a job. At least that's the way I see it. I am working for my people and making sure that they are active all year. It's not challenges, it's not issues. It's just the way it is. We need to learn from it. We need to live with it. During the next podcast, I will dedicate more time and maybe specific podcasts on the challenges we face within the industry with personnel, with execution of tasks, working in different countries. We operate mainly in Europe, although Europe is a free state within the European community to travel around. It is not quite like that. There are some legislations and regulations that we need to comply with. Just giving you guys a taste of what we're going to cover in these podcasts and what we want to do. One of the things that I deeply believe and I'm strongly convinced of is we need to talk more about the industry. We need to touch base on what drives us, what we struggle with, what the technicians struggle with. We need to be open about how to deal with people traveling, legal entities, executing the jobs, getting the correct tools, the correct personnel, and so on. It needs to be discussed. Each company their own policy, so we need to comply with that. But there is no reason why we cannot talk about how to improve, lessons learned. That's one big thing in the industry. What lessons have we learned from previous projects? The industry itself shifting. Solar energy has come a lot into play nowadays. Some companies are shifting, other companies are maintaining. I believe that wind will always be the stronghold of the renewable energy. It doesn't mean we are not looking into solar as well, but we are seeing more and more solar parks. At least where I live in Portugal, we are seeing a lot more investment into solar energy. It's still renewable, sustainable. working towards a better future, we need to embrace it. But there is a shift into that. One of the things that we will be discussing very soon, maybe in the next podcast, is talking directly with Tony from Renewables in Africa. Africa as a continent is one of the biggest growth potentials I've seen. Tony has done a wonderful job to raise awareness, investors to invest more in Africa and for people to understand more about the potential that Africa has with the renewable. Actually, let's introduce Tony into the podcast today. Let's get Tony into it. Tony, I don't know if you are still with us, if you are listening.
Afonso, I can listen to you very well. How are you doing?
Thank you.
Oh, I'm in the UK at the moment in my office. I was listening to you. Very happy to be joining this podcast. I think you've been talking about that for ages now. It's good to see that is live and going strongly. I was very interested by what you just said there, because the wind is definitely an area that requires a lot of focus and interest. I'm going to give you a little bit of anecdotal insight about wind from my side, but just briefly, people that don't know me, so I'm Tony Teo, founder CEO of a company called Renewable in Africa. We raise awareness about renewables and sustainability. And for the people looking to tap into the African markets, we help them there. So we help them to penetrate the market. So we give them visibility in deals. We're also very much involved into carbon markets for people that want to, obviously, a company that could be an eco-bridge to help them develop their sustainability, develop carbon projects. We definitely could help. And then we about as well to jump into AI. But I leave that for another time because this is another big topic. And I was just talking about the wind. It's interesting because I come from an automotive background. I'm an engineer from an automotive background. And I've actually started a journey into renewables from wind, especially offshore wind in the UK. That's where I started developing an interest.
Is that the time that you wrote your book as well? You've written a book about the renewable industry, right?
And it's very funny because I wrote that book as I left automotive to jump into renewables. And I started working, getting involved into some projects. And working as a consultant, you need data, you need insights. I realized that to find insight and data about solar, especially in Africa, it was a lot easier than for wind. At the time, there was nothing for wind in Africa as a whole continent. What you would see is just sporadic text or reports on one country or another, but nothing that's come together. And I was frustrated. And because out of frustration, I decided to write, which I'm very proud to say, which was the first published book on the wind industry in Africa, the very first globally, because before that you could see books about the wind sector, but for dedicated country, but nothing as a whole continent. So I took it on me to do it out of frustration, but a little bit of an accomplishment. Getting involved and working with you guys, AFF, has been a pleasure so far. That's roughly about me, but I'm very curious, interested talking about the sector in Europe and globally and being part of this conversation today.
Thank you for that. That shows there is a need to discuss more about the renewable industry, about the wind, about what's going on, what's growing, what's not growing, which countries we're going to go into, and which countries has the potential of having more renewable resources. And by you having that frustration about not having that information, and there's a lot of new people coming into the industry, there's a lot of questions about the industry. For example, countries currently in war are still developing renewable resources because there is a need for that. They don't always discuss it. I don't know if the reason we don't discuss it is because we are afraid of revealing some company policies and so on. We can still talk about it. That is why we are excited to start these podcasts and talk about several different topics, including Africa. That's always going to be one of the big potentials.
I think I agree with you there. I've always said the renewables energy industry at large, and maybe more so wind, it's a very conservative industry. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's actually no industry, but still conservative, because the people that they usually most of the time will come from, let's say, other energy industry where there was a certain culture that was applied, move it around and transport it into the sector. So that means there was a lot of conversation that needed to happen, and hopefully we're going to touch on some of them. The podcast for me to bring an idea. Now that I have you here, Afonso, I was just wondering, because I think that's something that could obviously help other people listening to us. What is your understanding of where the wind sector is at the moment in Europe, but also globally. If I'm correct, so the continent of Europe has built or surpassed something like 270 gigawatts of wind of installed capacity in 2025. But at the same time, it's still 30% below the targets. And we also have lots of issues with permitting that can take 3 to 5 years. What do you think about where we are right now and whether we are moving fast enough to meet decarbonization goals?
I don't think we are moving fast enough to meet those goals. We are trying very hard and moving fast towards it, but I don't think we are able to reach it just yet. There is just too much to do still. Then some solutions out there in the market that I believe are still not the final solutions. Vehicles, for example, that we are investing in. I believe there is still a lot of work to do. When it comes to renewable wind and what we still need to accomplish until 2030, that is one of the big targets Europe as a whole has set. We are not even halfway where we should be because of the wars around Europe globally and the financial and commercial instability we are feeling. We have not seen that exponential growth that we are expecting, at least not the last couple of years. Some companies are struggling with quality, they are struggling to keep up. But there is something bigger coming up next year. There is a shift coming up next year. We can see a lot more installed capacity being released. So there's a lot more turbines that is going to be installed. My guess is that there is going to be a big Asian investment as well from manufacturers from Asia. And that is also going to be a boost into meeting those targets in 2030. I'm still yet to see how that's going to develop, but we can already see that's coming. It doesn't take away all the manufacturers from Europe, but together we can make that happen until 2030. It's growing.
What you say is also what I've observed. And it's moving certainly fast because we know that there has been some accelerators recently. First of all, COVID has been one of them. After COVID, we've had the war in Ukraine with the decision of Europe to stopping receiving gas from Russia, which means that it really creates a gap. I think a country like Germany was getting 60% of its energy from Russian gas. If you stop it, whether it's a good thing or not, it creates a gap that needs to be filled.
We're not here to judge the political decisions that are being taken, but it does create a gap. Next year and over the coming years in Germany alone, that is going to be quite amount of additional turbines that is going to be installed. There's going to be a lot more power, a lot more energy going to be produced from the wind, renewable. Solar is coming into that as well. We can see big investments in those areas. The Baltic region has always been quite dependent on those gas lines. They become more dependent on an alternative resource, and there is big investments coming in the Baltic region as well. We can see that development already there, both onshore and offshore. That gap is definitely being created due to all the circumstances that we are living currently. The country of Ukraine itself, there is big investment ongoing in Ukraine. We know that firsthand because we are also supporting that. That growth is definitely there. Without wanting to go into all the politics, it's just a reality.
It's definitely a reality because I'll tell you one thing, just looking at facts here, let's first of all think as engineers first and then business people. Usually, unfortunately for some, period of war always are times where some of the biggest opportunity are created. And actually, very recently, I have had a number of people approaching me from Ukraine, for example, because a good part of the power system of the country needs to be rebuilt. And it's very, very pressing. It's probably because a lot of people will know me because I focus into the African markets. I have a good understanding of the global market for sure as well. But most of the people know me because they're focused into the African market. But that didn't stop a lot of these people approaching me because they need support from everywhere to rebuild. So that's just to support what you were saying there.
So going back to the gaps I created due to circumstances in the Mediterranean, earlier this year we had a blackout, which was very unfortunate. It costed a lot of money for a lot of people. There are rumors, theories, conspiracy theories, and so on. The reality is that blackouts can happen. If the grid network is not connected in the correct way, if there is no backup system that can do a cold start, which is counterintuitive against renewable energy, because the start cannot come from renewable energy. It's always the need to have a different type of source of energy power up the grid system again. One thing doesn't go against the other. We need to be realistic. We need one to boost that energy, to boost that power system. But that doesn't mean we are only dependent on that. That doesn't mean we need to discard renewable or that we only look at renewable. So we need to look at it in a constructive way. After the blackout, there has been a lot of discussions. What about the renewable? What about the wind? What about the solar? And there is actually more investment coming up. We want to be more independent. For example, Portugal, we want to have our own power system. We don't want to depend on Spain, for example. So all these small crises, all these small issues that do happen, they do create a shift on where we are and where we need to be. We can use renewable, but we need to remember that how the systems actually work, how the electricity actually work, how the grid system actually work. But we need to work towards a more renewable, more sustainable source.
One of the things that I've observed, at least in Europe as a leader globally, there's clearly a big political ambition, but sometimes the execution diverge. And I strongly believe that this is where collaboration must. But tell me, Afonso, I was actually wondering, a lot of people, when they are listening to somebody like yourself build a company from the ground up, which is growing, how does AFF company build a high performance safety first culture across countries?
A lot of headaches. I think this is my personal experience in talking with leaders or CEOs. They share more or less my experience as well. It's about mindset. It's hard work. We can take the best professionals, but money is not everything. You need to have a solid team that is safety conscious, that knows what to do, that wants to do stuff. You need the correct person on board. The correct persons are those that believe in you, listen to you, see what you're trying to do. In their own minds, they say, I want to be part of that. I want to contribute to that. And those persons are the persons that you can put in a bus and you say, let's go. And they will not ask questions saying, where are we going? When will we arrive? They will simply go with you. Of course, that takes commitment, support, guidance, and faith, believe in your personnel, and give them the freedom to be themselves, following your vision. I need to have the vision of what I want to do. I want to create a better industry. Of course, growth comes together, but my focus is not on making AFF Wind a multi-millionaire company. My focus is on making AFF Wind a strong company that the people that work with us, they have that feeling as well. They get their own salaries, good paying for it. They get the correct compensation for it, but they also see that they are actually contributing to change something. That's, I believe, the biggest motivation. The structure needs to be there. And then, of course, there is simple things that we need to take in place that sometimes are taken for granted. For example, all the certification they've gone through, it's not just a certificate, it's a whole system that is behind. For example, one of the ISO certificates that we have goes into the environmental, the maintenance into the organization. We have set up the whole structure so that all the personnel is following that in a safe way and they have a structure they can follow. You need to have guidelines, a goal. And people that are with you, they need to understand their goal and they need to be wanting to reach that goal as well with you. That is, I believe, what makes a company grow into different countries all over the world in a structured way, in a safe way.
Yeah. I'll add one thing to that, which is that's what I say to my team. Every time somebody's joining our team, they always will go through understanding what is the visions, what is the culture of the company, even before figuring out they have the competence skills, because that, at least some of it, I know I could teach to them. The very first principle is to stay what you do and do what you say, because I am fed up with people that don't respect their word. I would always want to mention the word, but everybody know what BS is.
And the more you grow as a company, the more you attract people because you have the need for it and they have the skills, but not everyone does what they say they are going to do. It's not about what we do when I'm looking or when the team leader is looking. It's about what we do when no one else is looking. When we are working alone, that's when we see commitment. Sometimes it's hard. One of the things I try to do for myself is I don't give up on people. Tolerance has a limit. The only understanding that I have at some point is that specific person we cannot work with. That's the only understanding that I get. But I don't give up on people. I like to give people chances, even if they get bad reviews. I like to believe that people can change. I changed myself. We are always constantly changing. I've had second chances in life. So I do believe that we need to give people chance. We need to teach sometimes. And I've learned this over the 20 years that I'm in this industry. I've learned two things. There is no good or bad. Of course, there is safe and unsafe. But sometimes we are doing something because we don't know any better. Because no one has taught us any better. So there is no good or bad. We are trying to do the best that we know, but no one has taught us. It's important that we understand why someone is behaving in such a way. Maybe they don't know any better. Maybe they're trying to catch attention, but they are doing that in the wrong way. Or maybe they just need to be guided in the correct way. But again, there is no good or bad way. There is one vision, one goal, and we need to understand how everyone works. That doesn't mean we don't have to step up to someone and say, listen, we've tried so much now, we really cannot continue. Please leave the company. But until that day comes, we have tried.
What about mentorship at AFF, especially for wind? Because a lot of people want to step into the industry. I was always looking at people installing those big blades, going up the heights. If you're not somebody who can support it, it's difficult for you.
Yeah, that's something that's working on. Mentorship. I am working on having people together with the correct person to support each other and the correct leader also to guide them, to be their mentor. One of the things that I'm also doing is, for example, with the service teams, we employ one with experience and the second team member is zero experience. So that's a newcomer. Of course, we screen them first. We check if they have some technical skills, motivation. When I'm interviewing a newcomer into the industry, I'm very tough. There's reality that I've gone through, like traveling, to working with people that you don't know, sometimes working with people that you don't like, not being able to eat what you like, not being able to stop when you would like to stop, the weather, the winds, the tough components, the tough tools, the long working hours. Because this is the reality in this industry. I try to teach them, tell them straight away, this is what you're going to expect. If it's less, then it's better. If it's just as hard as I've told them, then they've been prepared for it. Continuously, daily improvement. One of the things that we do, AFF, it's not because we do it better or worse. It's just some of the things we identified. We have daily follow-ups with everyone. So the full team has half an hour a day where we can contact each other, talk with each other. But also specific teams, we have a daily end of the day debriefing to talk about what has happened, what could have been better, what work have you accomplished, what is needed for the next day, and so on. Maintain contact with the teams that are out there in the middle of nowhere, alone, with no one else around.
Yeah. And I think this level of rigor, it's probably what would be good for the industry in Africa, because it's growing, but it's still very far. We were talking about the fact that we have 70 gigawatts in Europe now, in 2025, probably more, and still 30% below the target. If my figures are correct, in Africa, we talk about something like 9 gigawatts. And the key countries, as you and I discussed, South Africa, Egypt, and Morocco, there is a plan to build 30 gigawatts of project by 2030, which is just 5 years down the road. So if you stand a chance, I think we need a company like AFF to support. What's your take on the industry? I think you and I have been together in Morocco recently, and we have some projects we're looking at. What's your take on Africa, actually?
My take on Africa is that the big player countries, the big strategic countries, they are going to grow. We can see investment coming up. South Africa has always been a very big country in renewables, and it's still going. From the last time we were in Morocco, we could see it's coming up. There's big investment coming in Morocco, which is good for any European companies. Morocco will be a good entry country into Africa because it sits so close to Europe. It's something that I'm still trying to understand and study to see if Morocco's grid connection is actually going to be linked to European or Spanish grid connection. I see big capacities in Africa to grow and to step up. The other countries as Egypt and so on, they've always been quite big. They've always had renewable when they are just growing. Of course, we have the other big players coming up. Central Africa, it needs to be developed. I've had discussions with other persons in the industry that have been in Africa some years ago, like Kenya. There was a little bit of development, but then at some point it was stopped. I don't know if it's political or just logistically further away. It's too bad because there's a big potential. There is a big need to expand into Africa. One of the things I've seen in Africa was, I can't remember the name of the company that has developed electrical motorbikes. They've actually shown in electric motorcycles.
I remember
They've developed a network of changing battery stations.
actually.
It's amazing to see that, and we cannot implement that in Portugal or in Spain or in Europe because it's complicated, the network of stations to change batteries.
Why do you think it would be difficult to replicate in Europe?
Mentality
Okay.
maybe.
No,
I think there's no reason why we shouldn't.
yeah. I think it's all in all what you mentioned and what we cover overseas. I know we've covered a lot of topics in short space of time.
Very first podcast,
Yeah.
we have a lot to talk about, a lot of topics to explore, and what podcasts are going.
Are you going for that special podcast episode at Husum next year?
We definitely going to plan to have a live podcast, so with interconnections with whoever comes up.
No, that's fantastic. Thanks for inviting me. I see the industry growing. It's a good thing. Europe is leading the way. That's what it should be. As we develop in such an industry, as we talked about, it's very conservative. Having space that the wind of change. I love the names. It reminds me of a song. It's really needed for people to come and express themselves, talking about those technical issues, but also talk about issue way beyond the technical aspect. We can certainly talk about the political aspect, but also the human side as well. At the end of the day, you want to do all of that if you're not people contribute. And from our side, it's, we're just happy and humbled to collaborate and participate. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for participating. They are the ones that drive it further. It's also the team that is working there. Nothing would exist. We are grateful for that. I certainly look forward to have more talks with you and discuss a little bit further on how to get into Africa and Europe. Thank you very much for coming.
Now, thanks for that stuff. Looking forward to this. It's a great platform to be into. So thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Thank you very much for listening in. As you can see, there is a lot to talk about. We need to be honest, right? We need to be open about things. We need to be talking about the topics in our minds. We need to have the discussions over the projects, over the countries, over different companies and so on. Another topic that we don't always talk about is winter break that we experience in this industry, which is something that we learn to deal with, but no one really likes. The work slows down in the winter. We want to talk about what others are thinking. We want to be open about it. We want to discuss it with everyone. We want to invite everyone to sit with us, share their opinion, share their vision, share their mentality and mindset. And you're more than welcome to reach out to us and give us your topic. We'll create a specific podcast for it. The podcasts are going to be limited to one time a month. Every fourth week of the month, we're going to share one episode of the podcast. I'm wrapping up this first one. The next one is going to be surprising also. I'm looking forward to see you all and to speak with you all on the next month's podcast. Thank you all very much. Stay safe. Look after yourself. Those that are working in the cold countries, maintain yourself warm. Make sure an emergency kit, a backup kit in your vehicles. The snow will be coming within the next couple of weeks. We have guys up in northern Sweden that is already anticipating 0 temperatures in the snow coming. So make sure you're safe. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Remember, you are out there working for your family. So make sure you come home. Thank you all.
Well, thanks for joining us on AFF Winds of Change. We appreciate your time and hope you enjoy this deep dive into the wind energy world. Stay tuned for our next episode where Afonso Faria returns with more insights. Until then, keep riding the winds of change. Fully.